I was asking you again, show me your key or some proof you live here. People can't just walk in off the street.
I don't have to prove anything to you. I pay rent here like everyone else.
I'm reporting this. You don't belong here. This building is for residents only.
I serve this country. I earn respect. Stop treating me like I'm a threat for doing my laundry.
Let me take a deep breath before I walk you into this story. Because the moment I step back into that memory, I can still feel the weight of it in my chest. You're about to hear how one ordinary evening in my apartment's laundry room turned into a lesson that a certain woman, let's just call her a very determined Karen, will never forget. And trust me, she walked in there thinking she had authority, entitlement, and the right to judge a stranger based on nothing more than her own assumptions. What she didn't know was that I had lived through far worse than her stares, her questioning tone, or the way she tried to tear me down with her words. She believed she could diminish me. What she didn't realize was I have faced battles most people can't imagine, and I survived them with my dignity intact. That night, she tried to challenge the wrong person. But before I tell you what she said and how everything escalated to a moment that left the entire building talking for weeks, let me paint the picture of how it all began. You're just trying to wash your clothes after a long day. You step into the quiet laundry room of your apartment complex, minding your own business. Suddenly, a woman you've never met marches in, looks you up and down, and, without introduction, starts questioning your character, your integrity, and your right to exist in that space. Not with outright insults, not at first. No, she uses that tone, the one dripping with suspicion, entitlement, and judgment. Within minutes, she implies something so disrespectful, so demeaning, that the room falls silent. Two other residents freeze, unsure if they should intervene or pretend they didn't hear it. She thinks she's exposing a fraud. Instead, she exposes her own ignorance. And the moment she realizes who I truly am and what I've done for this country, her face drains of color. But by then, it was too late. Because the lesson, it wasn't just for her. Everyone there needed to hear it, and I delivered it calmly, firmly, and without ever raising my voice. All right, now that you've felt the storm cloud before the downpour, let's begin where the story really starts. It was a Wednesday evening, the kind where the sky can't decide if it wants to rain or not. I had just gotten home from a long shift at work. My body was tired, but my mind was quietly settled the way it usually is when you've seen enough life to appreciate peace. In my hallway, I passed neighbors coming home with groceries, kids arguing over whose turn it was to pick a show, the normal soundtrack of a midweek night in an apartment building. I carried a small laundry basket under my arm, a bottle of detergent in hand. Nothing unusual about my routine. I actually enjoy the simplicity of laundry. It's predictable, it's peaceful, and for me, it's grounding. I walked into the laundry room, which was empty at the time. The hum of the dryers was almost soothing, like white noise. I chose a machine near the back, set my basket down, and casually removed my hat, my veteran's cap, and placed it carefully on the ledge next to me. I always take it off when I do laundry, so it doesn't get damaged or smudged. That hat means more to me than most people will ever understand. I sorted my clothes, loaded the washer, added detergent, set the cycle, and exhaled. For a moment, it was just me, the steady churn of the machine, and the comforting familiarity of solitude. If only it had stayed that peaceful. Because just a few minutes later, the door swung open, and she walked in. The door opened quietly, but the shift in the room was immediate. I didn't look up at first. I only caught the soft squeak of the hinges and the clicking of shoes across the tiled floor. It wasn't until I sensed eyes on me, lingering, assessing, that I lifted my head. A woman stood just inside the doorway, holding a small laundry basket to her chest. She paused there, not moving forward, as if she needed an extra moment to take stock of who was already in the room. I gave her a polite nod, the same way I do with most neighbors. She didn't return it. Instead, her gaze drifted to the counter beside me, where my hat rested. It was subtle at first, a slight narrowing of her eyes, a faint purse of her lips, but I've seen that expression enough times in life to recognize it instantly. Something about the sight of that cap stirred an assumption in her. An unspoken judgment began forming the moment she connected the hat with the person wearing it just minutes prior. I turned away, choosing not to dwell on her reaction. Not every glance deserves attention. I'd learned over years and miles and uniforms that sometimes people stare only because they don't understand. But as I loaded a second machine, I felt her eyes return to me again and again. She hadn't moved from the doorway yet, as though she were deciding whether to enter or retreat. Finally, she stepped further inside, her posture stiff, her chin slightly lifted. She selected a washer 2 machines away from mine, close enough to observe, far enough to pretend she wasn't watching. Her movements were sharp, almost exaggerated, like she wanted it to be known that she was not comfortable sharing the space. I didn't internalize it, at least not then. I measured out detergent, poured it in, and closed the lid. The machine began its rhythmic spin, filling the room with a low hum once more. But her silence wasn't peaceful. It wasn't the kind shared by 2 strangers minding their own business. It hovered, expectant, like she was waiting for something to justify the scrutiny she was giving me. It was a silent interrogation, one she had initiated without a single word spoken. I took a seat on the small wooden bench along the back wall, hoping to pass the cycle in quiet. Usually this is the time I reflect or check messages on my phone. That evening, I simply sat with my thoughts. She continued sorting her clothing with a kind of restless energy, slamming her detergent bottle down slightly louder than necessary, shaking out clothes with quick, sharp motions, glancing at me whenever she thought I wasn't looking. Within a few minutes, the door opened again, and 2 younger tenants, maybe in their early 20s, entered, chatting quietly with each other. They greeted me in passing, and I returned the gesture. For a moment, their presence eased the tension in the room. But the woman across from me quickly grew still, as if she didn't appreciate having witnesses for whatever had been simmering behind her eyes. The 2 newcomers noticed her expression too. I saw one of them glance between the woman and me, his brow furrowing slightly as though he sensed an undercurrent he couldn't name yet. Still, there had been no words exchanged, only that persistent, uncomfortable feeling that the woman had walked in with a conclusion already formed. And like a storm cloud that refuses to release its rain, she seemed to be building toward something, searching for the moment to let it fall. I sat upright, attentive without appearing tense, and waited to see where her intentions would lead. I've learned in life that you don't respond to every provocation, only the ones that matter, only the ones that cross into the territory of dignity. But I could tell, even from those first few minutes, that she wasn't just curious. She wasn't just cautious. She was looking for a reason to validate whatever story she had created the second she saw me and that hat. And when a person is determined to prove a bias they walked in with, it rarely stays quiet for long. She turned her attention to the washer controls, but her eyes flicked toward my hat again, then at me, then back to her machine. Something in her expression shifted, subtle but unmistakable. It wasn't just doubt. It was disbelief mixed with a kind of offended surprise, as if my very presence paired with that cap disrupted the world she subscribed to. The two newcomers noticed her expression too. I saw one of them glance between the woman and me, his brow furrowing slightly as though he sensed an undercurrent he couldn't name yet. Still, there had been no words exchanged, only that persistent, uncomfortable feeling that the woman had walked in with a conclusion already formed. And like a storm cloud that refuses to release its rain, she seemed to be building towards something, searching for the moment to let it fall. I sat upright, attentive without appearing tense, and waited to see where her intentions would lead. I've learned in life that you don't respond to every provocation, only the ones that matter, only the ones that cross into the territory of dignity. But I could tell, even from those first few minutes, that she wasn't just curious. She wasn't just cautious. She was looking for a reason to validate whatever story she had created the second she saw me and that hat. And when a person is determined to prove a bias they walked in with, it rarely stays quiet for long. She turned her attention to the washer controls, but her eyes flicked toward my hat again, then at me, then back to her machine. Something in her expression shifted, subtle but unmistakable. It wasn't just doubt. It was disbelief mixed with a kind of offended surprise, as if my very presence paired with that cap disrupted the world she subscribed to. The two newcomers settled near the dryers, scrolling on their phones and sharing soft conversation. For a brief moment, I hoped that maybe the woman would simply finish her load and leave us all in peace. But deep down, I recognized the signs. She had walked in with a mission, even if she hadn't fully articulated it to herself yet. And when someone enters a space seeking a reason to challenge another person's legitimacy, silence is only the opening act. I stayed calm, composed, and quiet. If she intended to confront me, she would learn that I am not a stranger to confrontation, but I don't ignite it. I wait, I watch, and when necessary, I address it with clarity, not aggression. The woman closed her washer lid with a firm push and stood with her arms crossed, her eyes returning to me once more, this time with more direct focus than before. I knew then the storm was coming, and I was ready for it. The hum of the machines filled the air like a clock ticking down to an argument that hadn't yet been spoken aloud. I sat still, arms folded loosely, watching the circular window of the washer spin. Out of the corner of my eye, I could feel her stare settle on me again, heavier this time, deliberate. People reveal themselves in silence. You can hear intent in the way someone breathes when they're holding in words. Hers had that sharp inhale, half outrage, half conviction, that tells you she's about to say something she's already rehearsed. When her voice finally cut through the white noise, it wasn't loud. It was careful, practiced, the kind of tone people use when they want to sound polite while delivering an insult. She asked about the hat. Not directly, she framed it as curiosity, the way a person might ask about a brand or a logo. I could hear the undercurrent, though, the way she lingered on certain words, stretching them thin until they carried weight they were never meant to. I smiled faintly, answered her simply, honestly. Yes, I served. Yes, that hat is mine. I even offered a small nod out of courtesy. Her face didn't soften. It did the opposite. The polite mask wavered, and beneath it was a look I'd seen in dusty towns overseas, in crowded airports, and in offices where people assume too much. It's the look that says, "You don't fit the picture I had in my head." She started to circle her questions. Each one tried to confirm the same thing from a different angle. What branch? Where? When? Did I actually... I cut her off gently. Not with words, but by standing and reaching for the detergent cap I'd left near the machines. I didn't need to defend my history to a stranger doing laundry. The two younger tenants had gone quiet now. You could feel them listening without trying to. The tension made the whole room smaller. She tried again, louder this time,
her curiosity turning into something closer to accusation. Not a shout, just that tight, moral tone that people use when they think they're exposing something wrong. I could tell she believed she was performing some civic duty. Inside, I felt that old mix of irritation and restraint rise. Decades ago, I might have answered fire with fire. Age and experience taught me the greater strength is in control. So I didn't argue. I simply looked at her, level, steady. That silence unnerved her more than any defense could have. People like that expect resistance, not calm. Calm makes them question their own certainty. She filled the space with more words, talking about how some people like to wear symbols they haven't earned, how it's disrespectful to real veterans. Each phrase was coded in politeness, but the meaning underneath was jagged. I could have told her about the desert heat, the sandstorms, the names of friends I still remember more clearly than yesterday. But she wasn't asking to understand. She was asking to prove herself right. So instead, I said something simple. Ma'am, you might want to be careful with assumptions. They tend to say more about the person making them. That was all. No anger, no raised voice, just truth, spoken quietly. Her mouth opened, then closed. For a second, it looked like she might let it go. But pride doesn't surrender easily. She scoffed, shaking her head, muttering something about how anyone can buy a hat.
As the tension thickened, the room fell silent. Every pair of eyes turned toward the veteran, calm, steady, and composed. Karen's voice cracked under the weight of her own anger, her words echoing off the cold tile walls. He didn't shout. He didn't curse. He simply looked her in the eyes and said, "Ma'am, I've served this country so people like you could feel safe enough to do laundry in peace. But respect is something you can't buy or demand. You earn it." The whole room froze. Her smirk vanished. You could hear the hum of the dryers again and the quiet shame in her silence. But what happened after that moment, what Karen did next, shocked everyone even more. Because this story isn't over. Subscribe to our channel and comment part 2 if you want us to continue this story. As the tension thickened, the room fell silent. Every pair of eyes turned toward the veteran, calm, steady, and composed. Karen's voice cracked under the weight of her own anger, her words echoing off the cold tile walls. He didn't shout. He didn't curse. He simply looked her in the eyes and said, "Ma'am, I've served this country so people like you could feel safe enough to do laundry in peace. But respect is something you can't buy or demand. You earn it." The whole room froze. Her smirk vanished. You could hear the hum of the dryers again and the quiet shame in her silence. But what happened after that moment, what Karen did next, shocked everyone even more. Because this story isn't over. Subscribe to our channel and comment part 2 if you want us to continue this story.